So workshop, we're gonna do it a little different. There's no voting, but I do think we should take attendance. And I'm also inviting the Scarborough Land Trust as a participant in this conversation. Because they have a lot of experience on the other side of the farm that I think can be very helpful. That if there are public folks who come or, join online, then we can obviously take public comment in addition. So Jessica Sargent,
Stephen Zamorowski.
David Mackey, Scarborough Water Trust.
Vincent Boulder.
Nicole Hall, Community Services.
Ted Williams.
okay, so. My,
Oh, yeah, and Maggie.
and Maggie, I'm so sorry.
It looks like, I was so afraid I was gonna be late, I said, well, I'm just gonna do it on Zoom. It looks like I could have run up there. Oh, well.
So sorry, Maggie. So really, this workshop is just to talk about the proposed revisions to the land acquisition form or the. What are we calling it? LAF 2.0. So I was gonna defer to Doug and Zam, who have drafted.
Sam's chair.
I'm gonna defer to Zam.
And I'll defer to Doug.
And if we get stuck, Scott. Scott.
Mhm.
To sort of walk us through
Yes,
this document, which we provided end of last week, and then we also have copies available at the end of the table.
right. So, Doug and Scott from the Land Trust, who's represented here by Andrew and myself, went through this. And, with the idea of aligning it with the open space plan. And then simplifying and making it a little bit more streamlined, updating the process to be used for the foreseeable future for the land acquisition assessment. As we say in the assumptions, this is in alignment with the open space plan. The scoring is done with, we're assuming that we'll have access to the data, underlying data layers in the open space plan. Did we get a question? Did we get an answer to that question? It's kind of been a standing question, Nicole. And if we'll have access to that data.
I think the last time Jamie had said that we will, I don't think we do yet.
We will, but we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Assuming that it's public data, so either it will be it's public data that we identify which source they use for their assessment, or somehow they give us access to that information. So that this assumes that that will happen, and that the initial assessment will be done by our folks, our GIS folks, with that information.
I just wanted to add to this, that as we go through it, understand that we had to make assumptions about what the data from the open space plan would look like. We made assumptions that GIS overlays would be available. We made assumptions that these maps we looked at the report, because I was on the committee, but the only thing I know is what's in the report. I mean, I wasn't party to any analysis. Nobody was who was on the committee. That was done by the consultants. So when you look at the maps that are part of this report, they do list data layers. And using that, we were going in and saying, okay, here's what we want to look at, we believe, and here's the map that seems to fit this, because in some cases, the question doesn't always seem to apply to a certain map, but then you go into the data layers and you see that map is better. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I'm responsible for a lot of the interpretation of what the open space plan had. But ultimately, we came down to using the report and saying, well, gosh, if this stuff is there, we should have access to it.
Right. So that being said, before we finalize this, we just need to confirm that, talk with our GIS folks to make sure this will work. Before we put the final stamp of approval.
So it sounds like we need to coordinate with Jamie just because there's the consultants who I think have been a bit, they did it. I don't know how much Mike has been involved, who would be our town staff person that we would coordinate moving forward. So we need that sort of conversation to happen with the consultants, Micah and us, to make sure it's flowing in the way that we're using the fields we want to use, we're using the value that we want to use.
Right.
You're talking about a level of coordination.
Yeah.
And I'm not being facetious. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not sure it exists right now, but that's what we need.
Which does not exist right now, but for us to truly implement any changes, we need that coordination. We need to make sure
Sure.
it's giving an accurate output.
So let's take an action item for either Doug or myself to make that happen with a goal.
I've written it down, and Jamie's name next to it.
Right, okay, great. On assumption, 3, as in the past, the score, the numeric score is an input to our decision process. We're not grading these and plus 600 points or whatever, it passes and doesn't fail. It's not 600 plus points, it's gonna pass. This is an input, this is a tool for discussion. It is a good quantitative analysis, but that's not the only thing that we're considering, and there may be some other factors to consider. Once we confirm and finalize this new score, we'll go back to some historical land acquisitions and we'll rescore those just so we have a frame of reference. So that if the new score is 600 points and the Broad Farm only got 400 points, we'll have some explanation of why that is. We'll rescore, we won't go back to everyone, but we'll pick a handful. Okay, so in number 4. This form is useful for recreational or passive recreational land acquisition. Oh, number 5, sorry, number 5. If this board has a role in active purchases or some other kind of historical purchase of land, we'll have to determine another source of evaluation, another method of evaluation. So that's a discussion for later time, I believe. To determine what our goal is there, if the town council wants our input, and if so, we need to do something different. The plan, the evaluation is organized according to the priorities for the town setup and the open space plan. We combine a few to simplify them, but you'll see that later. And some of the water acquisition scores are high because they also affect hazard mitigation of flooding and that sort of thing. So those are the assumptions. I'll just open up before we go through step by step. This morning I added up the category points. It seems like, well, it does. Recreational and connectivity is scored way relatively higher than anything else. So we should probably look at that. I don't think it needs to be way higher. The vote of the public is pretty consistent weighted as far as these categories. It's a little bit up and down, but I don't think it's significant enough that any category should be that much higher than any other. That's my opinion. We can open that for discussion. There may be questions before we kind of go item by item about the process or how we got this far.
No, I just want to thank you for doing
Well,
the hard work, and I don't think it's over, but there continues to be hard work, but I think we're in a good progress.
right. So let's jump into,
Scott,
yes,
Scott Gunther gave us tremendous amount of time.
yes,
And was a great help, so. Well, record, yeah.
absolutely. So under clean water, first category. Question 1, and also, I think I said it in the email, I don't know if you said it. The purpose of this workshop is to look at the question, look at the point assessment, and determine that we're on the right track and kind of check those pieces off. We'll double check the calculations and the formatting. If you see a spelling error, bring it up, but this is the work document. So our goal here is to look at the question and look at the relative scores and get that set if we can today. So, question one, parcel includes significant aquifer for recharge area. This is a layer on the open space plan map, and we assume it's very important, especially west of Pike, everywhere. And we gave that 50 points, yes or no. A lot of these questions we reduce from points per footage or acreage to yes or no. There's still some of those, but some of them we just simplified this to a yes or no.
That's a major change, but that reflects the size of the parcels that are coming to us these days. You know, back when we were looking at 400-acre things and stuff, that kind of thing, it's 400 acres, but only, you know, this 100 isn't wetlands or something, you know, whatever. So 20 years ago was a big difference. And so this approach that Suzanne has outlined seems to make a lot more sense, it's gonna be more streamlined. It'll apply to all the properties, as long as we go back and redo our old ones with whatever was, we'll have a good benchmark.
So question CW2, parcel provides a buffer of natural vegetation from the edge of the river, stream, or saltwater marsh, bay, or beaches. Again, this is a layer from the open space plan 25. And we did quantify this one, give it a range based on the buffer size, the width of the buffer, 75 to 500 feet. And we gave it a maximum of 50 points.
And I know this has come up before, you get points for both
Each
sides.
side, yeah, each side.
Each
You have
side.
it, yeah, each side.
Oh, each side, so
Yeah,
it's really small.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess we could up to find that. We'll make that happen.
Okay, sorry,
I
because
have plenty of room because obviously I wanted the page base to fall correctly, so we have room. So,
the reason why I'm asking is I'm trying to keep a running tally of the max points per category, so
yeah,
it would actually be more than 170 because you could get 100 in that one.
But it's a max of 50 in that
Max of
category
50. Oh, it's a
anyway.
max of 50.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So total max of 50.
Okay.
So you just explain how that works. To me, just so I understand, so.
So if it's a 75, the width of the, on average, let's say maybe average, is 75 feet. You would get I'm sorry, this should say, you would get 2 points per 100 linear feet. On
Of the
75
75 foot buffer.
buffer. Okay.
So-
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. 2 points per what?
So, if on average, you have a 75-foot buffer,
Yeah,
between a water source and the land. If it's a 7-foot buffer, you would get 2 points for every 100 linear feet along the water. For a maximum of 50. If it was 500-foot buffer, you get 4 points per 100 linear feet.
I guess I don't understand for purposes of this form, how you're gonna score each side separately.
That's done using the GIS mapping. We've been doing it,
Oh, okay, so they're gonna score
If
it.
it was 100-foot stream, you would have the two sides, so 200
Yeah.
feet times the amount of points
I see.
based on the buffer.
With a maximum.
Or maybe
With a
the
max
buffer
of
on one
50.
side is only 75 feet, but there's a 500-foot buffer on the other side.
Right,
Because
exactly.
we've seen some funky
Right,
shapes.
and it's not, I mean, we're not gonna get out there with tape measure, but we're gonna look at the map and use GIS to generally say, is this a
Pretty-
But it-
75?
pretty
For
accurate
purposes-
using GIS.
Yeah.
You know,
For
it's-
purposes of the form,
50 to 500.
you may have to score this a couple times.
Okay, if we need
Is
to.
that
but
right?
We've
Yeah.
been doing this, we've been doing, this is not a change.
Okay,
This question remains pretty similar, but we changed the buffer widths because to align with the open space plan.
It used to be a 100 and a 250 separately.
Yeah.
It's consolidated and increased to a 500-foot
Right.
buffer, which we didn't have previously.
And you have explicitly explained that each side of the stream is scored individually.
Is there any reason you cap your points? You say maximum points. What is the philosophy behind that?
Yeah, the philosophy behind that is that not always more is not always better in relative terms. And if you had and we wanted to make these properties Well, I mean, the numbers compare from one to another. So just like some points, it's a yes or no were points, we didn't wanna put. Make one property 1,050 points and similar property that maybe the buffer's not as big to be 400 points. Based on just one question, so you don't wanna be, wait.
Concept is equal weighting,
Yeah,
Too much.
that makes a lot of sense.
although I say that, and we're not really actually equally weighted, but. You know,
No,
trying-
that absolutely makes sense.
It's an important question. Maybe it's worth more points. Well, we can change these points. And maybe we should, given, well, we can talk about both, because
Well, that's-
recreation connectivity.
Running
Right.
tally of the
Right.
max points per category so that
Yeah,
we can see it.
no, that makes.
Yeah.
No,
So the way I did this morning,
Makes
after we
absolute
had
sense.
water was 170 max.
Yep.
We combined sea level and hazards, that's 150 max. The recreational connectivity is 345, so it's way out of whack.
No, it's a good way of weighting each category against another category.
Right.
It makes sense.
So 3.
345, and then habitat is 200.
But we'll,
So-
you know, we'll go through that. but-
We'll go
Right,
through that.
and just so for
Given the
reference,
questions in that category, we're gonna
Right.
want, I think, we're gonna want more points in that category.
yeah,
But how many?
yeah, so let's go, maybe we'll talk about the points after. we go through.
Yeah, I think after I just,
Yep, no, that's good. I just did this
I think
morning.
equally
that-
weighting, roughly equally weighting the questions themselves. Is the important thing, as opposed to the categories, because the categories are a little. Variable, more because the stuff is in them, yeah.
oh, and that, part of that. For me is that they were equal, they were generally.
Generally.
Equal priorities based on the public input for the open space plan, so for me, it makes sense that they're generally.
And that's where I kind of
Yeah,
reacted.
Well,
I
that
didn't-
they may have been roughly equal in terms of the open space plan, they were roughly equal, you know, some slightly less. Percentage than others, but. The questions that fall into those that help us evaluate a property
You're right, you're,
can overweight, I mean, connectivity is overweighted because it's recreation and connectivity.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about hiking trails, we're talking about connections all the way through, you know, green belts and everything else, so there's other stuff going on.
yes.
And we'll see it.
Yeah. So CW3 parcel includes.
Can I just go back?
Yes, please,
Just,
yes,
so that the committee knows, you know, if I think about properties that have come here for. The ones with most likely, interesting boundary shapes are probably gonna be conservation easements. Portions of conservation easements on parcels. So there might be some discussion that the committee has to have in the future. Where you might have a 75-foot buffer for only 75 feet. Now, does that get? 1 point or something, you know, you guys might have, and then it goes to. Might drop down to 50 feet, and it might go up to 100 feet.
yeah,
So you might have some variability, other. Parcels that shouldn't impact you guys. That have these. Incredibly. Strange boundaries are open space transfers from development. But they're not usually coming before. CLB.
right. Yeah, so to answer your first point of your question, I think 0 to 75 should get 2 points. I mean, excuse me, zero,
Actually, good.
0 to, yeah. 0 to 75, so no partial points. So 75, 76 to 250, so we'll make that a range.
Yeah.
So parcel includes a road bluff or steep slopes over 20%, yes or no? It's a similar question, we combined 2 there from the open space plan. Parcel includes highly erodible soils, that's from a data layer in open space plan 25. So those are the clean water questions totaling 170 points. You'll see a lot of questions in the E and H that refer to water as well, but it's mostly on flooding, not quality of water.
So can I just ask one more question? So in this last point here, erodible soils. that doesn't get any points?
Because,
Something with erodible soils is not considered valuable, or if you put it, if you say no, that's no points.
I'm
yes,
guessing that if it has erodible soils,
If it
it's
has
more reason to
erodible soils-
conserve it, right?
right.
And that's a GIS layer,
Right.
that's not a,
Well, we're trying to,
So you want to preserve something with erodible
Yes.
soils.
yes. Yes.
Under the assumption that development of properties like that results in higher levels of erosion.
Okay,
And remember, the relative impact on our decision is small.
I was just wondering what the conditionality was there for assigning points.
Yeah, so there's no. No,
No,
measure a percentage of it, or you could say 50% of the land is erodible soil, but. We try to simplify it, if the GIS layer identifies a piece of that as erodible soil, we'll say yes, or we'll say yes.
okay,
Just to simplify it.
And we don't know more than that. Now, we know that there's a GIS layer that they've identified that has quote unquote erodible soils. We don't know that. It's part of the problem. So
we don't currently know.
we may not know even when we have access to all the
Right.
information, because there's only a certain level of, explanation of where they came up with.
It's a pretty straightforward thing though, because USDA has soil maps for the entire town. And there are certain soils that are considered more erodible than others, so you use just baseline soil maps, that's an indicator there.
Right, and I assume that's what the consultants use, some public data, right?
Nobody's been out there, nobody's looked at that stuff, they don't update those on a regular basis, you use the data you have. And the soil maps are, well, they're better than the 100-year floodplain maps.
Okay, so any questions about clean water? General, okay. On hazardous, environmental hazard mitigation and sea level rise and arsenic, we put all these together because they were separated somewhat in the open space plan, we put them together because it all seems to be the same purpose of protecting the marsh, protecting sea level rise, protecting flooding. Or at least giving the marsh someplace to go when it rises, I guess we're not gonna prevent it. So EH1 parcel includes land within or adjacent to the 3.9 foot mitigation plan. The open space plan used the 3.9 marker level. So this means, as the marsh sea level rises, there's a line at 3.9 that backs up the land or the marsh to a new point. And we feel like it's very important for us to conserve those lands. And we see that 40 points.
Yeah, there was the piece of marsh migration, which is what the marsh could be expected to grow to over time. There was also the piece that is more immediate, which is maximum flood levels. So the 3.9 was reflective of both. This is near and dear to my heart, 'cause we're down.
I live there.
So, and we, a year ago, January, we saw flooding that was really close to the 2-foot level. That was forecast. The 3.9 allows us to look at the way, what pieces are potentially going to be flooded and or turning the marsh over time. And those pieces of property that might be sitting out there right now, and they're nowhere near the marsh, may be in that 3.9, and therefore adds value from a conservation standpoint.
The question we had in the working group is, should we extend that line out to the 10.9? So there was a 6.2 and a 10.9 layer on in mitigation, the way that the GIS map work. So the question for the committee is, should we extend that line up to the maximum they measure? Should we keep it at 3?
level.
Could we do something similar to the buffer where you get with it's different, the shorter distance gets higher points and the,
That's what they did in the open space plan, again, for simplicity, we didn't shoot that.
well, it's entirely possible, we run the numbers on a couple examples.
What was that?
Yeah.
It's entirely possible what?
It's all the same, right? If,
So the open space, they did 1.2, 1.6, and 3.9, so we did the maximum of the open space plan. The data goes beyond that all the way up to 10.9, so we took the maximum of the open space plan as our line. Seemed to be reasonable.
If we wanted to look at using a higher one. Scott showed us the GIS mapping, and it's the Maine Natural Areas Program, MNAP. So that's readily available GIS level, layers. So it certainly could be used if we wanted to say whether this is in the 3.9, it's in the 6.2 or the 10.9. I think there's some value in thinking about this simply because we may be looking at properties that don't have a lot of other redeeming value, but they're adjacent to, they're in that 10.9 and seems to be something that would increase potential value long term. But certainly the 3.9 makes all sense.
In this plan, and there's no expiration to this form, obviously we'll have to update it, so we were looking for a long use, what, 20 years? You had used this one for 20 years? So you can make an argument that might as well go to the max.
Well, that's what I was thinking. For longevity. The other thing is that this is a bit of a living document, right? So as parcels come in for our consideration, we may find we need to amend it. And see how it goes.
Yeah, and again, that would be a good example of if we didn't change the scoring. If we found a huge property that's just beyond the number or whatever. We could say, hey, this is a very valuable property because of this reason.
Right.
And we could recommend to assess it, recommend the purchase. Is there any downside, do you think, to extending that to the 10.9 number?
I'd have to see the map, right?
Yeah.
But what is, like, just suddenly all of us.
No. No, it's just. I think it was maybe 25% bigger, it's must be huge.
Maybe it wasn't uniform. Obviously.
Yeah,
And it's something we should look at. It would be nice to look at it. I was just thinking, as you said that, though, it would be nice to know when it's really evaluation. Even if it's scored on a 3.9 relative to the 3.9, it'd be nice to know about the 6.2 or the 10.9. Yeah.
what are your thoughts, Andrew, on this?
Well, I think from Scarborough Land Trust point, we would recommend a higher number. Pete Zelinski might be a good one to get some input here.
Yeah.
Cause he's done, this is a big thing, what he's been working on. Anyone watching this video, though, I do want to just restate that this is not impacting parcels throughout Scarborough. This is only evaluating parcels that are voluntarily coming before this committee for conservation. So it's not like you're regulating anything.
Right.
So I think it would behoove the committee to be more foresighted in terms of thinking about these things in the future. 3.9 is kind of, I think by a lot of scientists now, the past number, right? That was,
You said
we're expecting to overshoot
personally
that
witnessed
quite a
2
bit,
feet.
yeah.
1 point, yeah. The forecast from the Maine Natural Areas Program, it was very current at the time. It was a year and a half ago. I wasn't aware of the 3.9 until recently, until this came out. It's,
Yeah,
but as Sam says, you know, you look at the 10.9, you look at the 3.9. Scott was showing us on the GIS overlays, and they're not terribly different, except in a few places where they're significantly different because of the obvious flows. Yeah, because it's, you know, especially if you can get sheet flow coming up, so, you know, if you're bounded by something, it's different, but so. It's worth looking at, that's for sure. Andrew's point is very well taken. All of this is just for properties that are brought to us. We're evaluating
this
properties.
is nothing to do with flood insurance or anything like that.
We're evaluating properties that are brought to us for potential purchase using the land bond funds. So we want to be able to look at that property and say, what values does it have relative to our conservation goals? And
Now and into the future.
right, and properties that are helping to protect water quality in the marsh are obviously of value to us as a town, so.
Well, I would recommend, let's go to 10.9 right now. And see if, maybe when we put this out, get Noah's input, Susan's input. David's input.
And Pete's input.
Pete's input, okay. All right, let's do that.
And it's only one question out of all of them.
Right.
It's, you know, and it is adding some value on a very, very particular basis, but that's what all these do. They add some value on a particular basis. But there's a whole evaluation that's done, so it's a relative. Pretty small piece.
EH2, this is something that was in the open space plan. We're not really sure what it is. Parcel is included in a potentially hazardous sites.
Did we skip the H two?
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, part of all parcels is a 100-year floodplain. Okay, sorry. So we gave that 20 points. That's something the same as we had before. Any questions on that? Okay, now parcel includes potentially hazardous sites. We weren't exactly sure if that's
Good or bad?
a hazmat site, is that a Superfund site, or is that
You just don't have access to the information, so.
DEP has a whole series of maps of hazardous areas. Very complex mapping because there's so many different bonds.
Yep.
I can show that to you sometime if you're interested.
Yeah, the question is, can we use the open space overlays?
Yeah.
Or do we have to go to another map? But if we have to go to another map, that's what we should be looking at.
so? And then the thought here is if it does contain some kind of hazardous material as a hazardous site, we took points off. And you could also make the argument that maybe we want to sequester that too, buy it to make sure nobody digs in and disturbs it. Maybe this is a question that we don't really need. What are people's thoughts?
I'll just give an example of something that the town might want to conserve. So if you had a PFAS contaminated site that could not grow food anymore, which they've had in other parts of Maine, fortunately, we haven't had too much here. That use could become a preserve or park or something like that. What you don't want to be doing is disturbing soil and eating things and all that soil. But typically walking passive recreation uses are considered okay on those places. That's just one example.
Yeah, I was thinking another example would be, the sand pit on Broadturn that put in native development. Is that hazardous? I don't know, but you wouldn't find it very attractive for a lot of reasons, except the fact that we might give us access to land beyond it. I don't know if that falls into hazardous category or not, but
I'm pretty sure that wouldn't,
That wouldn't,
only based on the discussions that were held with the open space plan at the time.
okay.
They were looking at PFAS sites.
PFAS and-
That was the primary thing that everybody was worried about. And, you know, former landfills,
Yeah,
stuff like that. There weren't many in Sparkwood. I guess the question in my mind, and it didn't occur to me as we were going through this, but it occurs to me now, is this a question for this evaluation, or is it a question for our discussion of and on-site visits?
Sure.
Because Andrew's example, for example, you know, we don't need to give points plus or minus on that. We need to decide whether a site like that has recreational value, is safe, you know, and in which case, you know, we count it as a positive. Or as a negative value in our minds, we count it as a negative, but not necessarily just from the standpoint of points. I don't know, we could do it either way. Yeah. We didn't have, in the old one, we didn't have this, but we didn't have the open space plan.
It would certainly be part of our recommendations for the restrictions on the property. So it's something we would discuss. I don't know that we need points. But maybe it's not points, but like, I think we have an other factors section that we include it as something that doesn't get points, but is part of, we have to discuss it for each property, if applicable.
It's like other discussion points.
yeah, I like that idea. And, yeah, we'll put it just below the score.
Yeah.
Score the points.
So it's part of the evaluation, but not part of the points evaluation,
Yeah, I like that.
because it could be positive, it could be, it could be negative.
Well, it might also be something that would absolutely require mitigation before acquisition.
Right.
Have you ever looked at a property that has had a hazardous site on it? Pat, what is your approach for that?
Our checklist would include, things like, you know, is it okay for local biodiversity? Is it a right for passive recreation? The closest we've come is to look at working with the town on a site that had sludge spreading back in the 70s. But the testing has actually come up fairly well. It hasn't shown any contamination. So it's really a field issue. Yes. But I could imagine that, you know, brownfield redevelopment is a big thing in a lot of places. Which are, you know, sites that don't get up to Superfund level. They're usually state designated sites. It is possible that there is potential for both passive and active recreation on sites that, you know, I mean, again, there aren't that many in Scarborough. We don't have a huge industrial history like that, but it's possible. If you look around the country, a lot of old landfills are now parks. They get capped and turned into parks. So I mean, it is something that happens.
All right, so moving back to discussion point. EH3 parcels included in or adjacent to a resource protection zone. This is from the open space plan. It's a sub-layer.
This is why, it was interesting doing this, because when we started looking at what were in these data layers, and so the environmental hazards map for Scarborough. Okay, and that's this one with all the red on it. But you look at the data layers that are in that, and you got FEMA flood zones. And resource protection zones, and erodible bluffs, highly erodible soils, shoreline zones, and potentially hazardous sites. And potentially hazardous sites are very low ranking in there. So exactly what that means in terms of how they developed this map, we don't know. But we had a long discussion about this in terms of some of these other data lakes here and realize those are important data lakes. You know, the resource protection zone, erodible soils, et cetera, et cetera. So the questions that we put into this have more to do with those layers than they have to do with this particular map, whether something falls in this map.
That makes sense to me.
Which brings us to H4 shoreline zone. Then we added in or adjacent to those zones. And then the size of the parcel, H5 in acres. We felt that, although we don't want to focus size being the biggest thing, or we don't want to really diminish small quality land parcels by overweighting the size of land, but we feel strongly that the size of the parcel means more surface area, more vegetation, trees, more oxygen, more carbon sequestration, as well as surface flood mitigation. So we felt that was appropriate to put the parcel size in the map here, in the evaluation here for maximum points. That brings us to the end of that, so it would be 150 point total.
That is the whole,
That was separate. I
Okay.
put that in parentheses.
okay,
I'm gonna bring this up, and I hate bringing this up because I don't want further controversy or anything, but
Please do.
this is one where I was just trying to think through the scoring. And I mentioned this to Jessica before the meeting. You know, this is where it is very possible that Scarborough Land Trust or someone else could bring different types of properties to PCLB. One could be a parcel that is intended as working forest land. That would have commercial forestry applications. It would have to be under a forest management plan under our rules. But it could be a conservation easement that protects working forest. It could be an acquisition or an easement on farmland. The interesting thing I think about that is if PCLB was ranking a parcel that was coming before, you know, going through this process, you know, it would be a certain size, so it might get points for size. Yet is a property that's gonna be under commercial forestry equal 100-acre piece the same as 100-acre piece that is not gonna be commercially harvested? I don't know, I mean, that's the question I guess I could put for you. 100-acre natural forest parcel, is that the same as a 100-acre piece that is gonna be intensively farmed? And you know, this is just one question, then you get into wildlife habitat questions and other questions that, you know, you might go through the process in the beginning. And it would rank very high on some of these, but. You know, once some of those applications are being used, if you went back and re-ranked it, it might not score that high. And, you know, there's points for working lands in addition to those, so one of those parcels could potentially rank pretty high in the beginning. So I don't know how you deal with that, that's why I'm hesitant to bring it up. But, you know, it is just something I was trying to think through what could come before this committee.
Right. The first response to that is it's important to think about it, and that's why we separated the size of the land, the use of it. And that's why, again, we have a maximum score of 50 points here, so it's not the overweight size to any huge degree. So we have we have a section on working land, which I think is going to bring up a lot of discussion, so we pull that and then. Right. So just as far as the size, go.
Interject quick, you know, Andrew brought this up before, and I understand the concern. I'm not sure where that concern is coming from based on our history. And we have several properties that are easements. Some are farms, some are not farms. They can bring to us easements. We've never turned down an easement. Easements are a great way to preserve open space. The committee, in every single case that the land trust has brought us an easement, or the Maine Farmland Trust has brought us an easement, or whoever, has said that's a good investment. It's never, ever, the decision has never, ever once been made based on this. That's very, very important. I want the public to understand that too. This is a part of the process. It allows us to create some quantitative basis for the evaluation we're doing, but the evaluation has multiple dimensions. Probably the number one dimension, particularly these days, because of the quality of the work that the land trust does bringing properties, is the level of their presentation, the level of their work, that, you know, saying, here's why we're here. That has more weight. And I'm just saying this for your benefit, Andrew, because I know it's true, because we've been doing it. Far more weight than this. I think this is valuable. I think, you know, there's many people on the council, et cetera, who want to see some numbers, and so it has to be good, but it isn't the way we make a decision. It shouldn't ever be the way we make a decision. Shouldn't be a check off list, you know, and if you get enough checks, then you're good. That's just not the way it should be.
I mean, I totally agree with that. I appreciate that the committee doesn't just use points as a sole decider. And that easements that we bring or someone else brings before this committee are vitally important to the future of the town, whether they're working farms or working forest lands. Those are significant criteria that the state has recognized, the federal government has recognized as important. I guess the only reason I brought it up is I could see a situation where a parcel like that scored higher than a natural parcel that was giving flood protection, wildlife habitat. Things like that just went strictly through the point system. And then someone would look at that, not knowing all the other debate that went on about the significance of these things. And just look and say, well, yeah, we should be only doing parcels like this because this one was 100 points higher than this one, you know, this natural parcel that filled a lot of the open space attributes, scored much lower.
If people just look at the points, that's definitely correct. In fact, you can go back and see that Fuller Farm and Broadturn Farm underscored other properties. If you go back and look at points, they did. I mean, and you know, taking away and looking at the importance of those two properties and the value of those two properties to the town in so many ways. But they underscored many of the properties. I said several other properties. They underscored parking at Higgins Beach. I mean, parking at Higgins Beach got a ridiculous, you know, score because of what it meant in terms of public access and unique area, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, this is part of the process, right? And I appreciate all of Andrew's comments. I would say to this committee, particularly since, you know, I will be leaving the committee, that we should continue as we have, where this committee's evaluation of the information is the most important thing. And that point should be made, as it has been very well, to the council when the presentation is made. That's why the presentation ends up being important. Because, you know, we talk about some points, we talk about this, we talk about this, we talk about that, and we make the case. And I think that it's very important that this committee be able to do that so that we don't get into situations such as Andrew was talking about and miss the opportunity to invest in a property that we should.
I'd like to add a preamble to this form, to that point, that this, kind of where we have the assumptions, have it assumptions.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
sort of, it was a preamble as to how this tool is used, the intention of this tool, just to make it clear right up front before people even get into the numbers, that it's a guide. It's not if you score this, check.
Well, we have
and-
that the question also is, are we gonna completely redo this whole?
We also have to redo that.
Right, so this, to me, that's where this goes. This is just a form. Any discussion about that issue should be in this.
Well, just people taking out of context, and like, if it's, like, it says it first line that this is,
Yeah.
It probably wouldn't hurt to have it in both
Yeah.
places.
it doesn't have to be a long
Yeah.
preamble, just sort of a.
Sure, we.
And-
You
and-
know, we see this, we don't file this anywhere.
But people do request it.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll add,
Something about the point system is a basis for discussion and a
Yes.
basis for dialogue, moving towards a recommendation, but it's not the deciding factor.
Right.
Some
Okay.
language about that, because to Doug's point about there may be people who are just looking for big numbers in the town council, but it's not about the numbers.
sure,
I would argue, not to write a new preamble, I'd argue to rewrite. As you see necessary, what's already in the charge, the acquisition evaluation process formal document from 2002. Because, when you get into the acquisition evaluation process, which is a part of it. And it's interesting, when you look at it and you say, acquisition evaluation is only a part of the process when you read this document. But the process was an application with 3-page land acquisition application form, 2 maps, location and parcel, photos, presentation to the Parks and Conservation, how do the people of Scarborough benefit from, et cetera, what's the urgency of the purchase? Number 3, evaluation, preliminary evaluation, qualitative site visit, detailed assessment, quantitative, that's this. Only 1 of 4 parts in the evaluation period itself. Other significant factors, and then 4, recommendation to the town council, purchase strategy, possible partners, management arrangements. Okay, so this has been really well thought out. Should it be revised? Fine, yeah, that's not an issue. But, let's go back and let's get this out in front of people, because I'm not sure that enough people have read this. And so they're thinking, oh, you got this evaluation process. I understand, people can definitely do that. Andrew's concern is well taken. I'm sure not a single person in council. Because I'm not sure how many people in this room even knew it existed, right? So anyway, it's there, and as part of this process, let's make that, part of the finalizing this thing is to reiterate and reword as necessary, rewrite as necessary, the evaluation process, because that lays out all the steps, and this is one.
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
it would be-
we had discussed that the evaluation form that did go online that does need to be updated.
Yes.
Might have a value in having a cover sheet that is
Yes.
laying out all your
Yes.
steps and
Okay.
expectations.
Steps and timing.
Yeah,
yeah, so that's, and then also. I think you do it to some degree, but when you present to the council, go through the whole process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And then
just walk it through.
just walk through it first, so we. Yeah,
I
this
do
is, does it.
realize that I'm usually up there at 10 o'clock and they ask me to keep it short, so.
right.
We could still do it in that format, though. We could do it,
Right,
do it in the format of.
do a handout, so you could
Whatever
actually
it's
have
been,
it.
yes.
People could look at it.
Well, that's why I would recommend that preamble goes with every. Every project that goes into the board packet, the council packet, because, the council has a lot of things they're working on. This is not,
It's easy for them to remember.
they can't be experts in everything, and they don't know all what goes on with the PCLB. They don't know how the land bond has been used over time and the process that is brought into it.
Yeah.
So,
We often have
just-
members.
yeah, just kind of reminding them
Yeah.
each time, because they're ultimately the decision makers.
We only make a recommendation.
Good, okay. So I'll add something in any standalone document should probably have something about that. Yeah. It's-
There has been heightened scrutiny in the past couple years where there've been documents requested, and so I think it's good to have
Yeah.
the context on all pieces.
So, given that we started talking about organized, I suggest we go to the last section on working lands. It's just 3 questions, but it's a big question. Should
the board be looking at the uses of the land and providing points for farming, timbering, community gardening, those kinds of things, or access issues. It's on the last page. Or should we move that to more of a discussion point? I mean, the open space plan, to me, when you read it, it really promotes farmland as a huge part of our heritage and our, the community, the value to the community. That's why we put it in. But then it brings that to questions of, okay, what kind of farming? The farming can also diminish the conservation value of land. Timbering. Is this a family farm where it's conservation forestry, or is this clear cutting, right? So I'll just leave it that and get people's thoughts of, should we be in the business as the board to basically quantify, provide points for working lands? As we do here, number one, is it a growth, is it crossings for growing crops, tree farming, grading land? Will it continue to be used as such? Will part of the land be used for community garden, gardening, agriculture? Yes. Does the land provide access to fisheries such as plant flats, blah, blah, blah?
Just for context, we did, we did have it in our evaluation on a minimal basis, but we had it in the evaluation before at some points for it. The relative importance of having it in here, I think, is low. I don't think, I think these types of properties require a lot of discussion, a lot of understanding of what is the context, what is the structural orientation, are these farmers that we're going to hire potentially, or is this some conglomerate coming in to harvest trees and grow trees supposedly, whatever. So the context of that discussion and that use and the longevity of that use, is it the way it's going to be used? Is it a usage that that has a time frame? You use it up 10 years, you use it. I mean, because that's conceivable. Are there, there's so many issues, so a lot of discussion. I'm not sure the point, we can't, as Sam says, we can't get at that with points. So.
I can also see different organizations having their own guidelines for what is possible for future uses, so. I don't know that we, as an evaluator, necessarily need to be assigning those points, but we definitely need to have those discussions as not necessarily a point, but as a kind of discussion, what are the restrictions? It could be a deed restriction, but what are the, I'm just gonna say restrictions, that will be imposed on these different types of uses, like access, practices, that sort of thing. We as an organization allow one structure to be built, but that's it in perpetuity, just that kind of stuff that we wouldn't necessarily assign a point total to, but we would want to have that conversation about what it will likely look like in the future. So I'm thinking other considerations personally, but.
What do you think, Andrew?
Well, I mean, Scarborough Land Trust thinks all those things are incredibly important. Commercial forestry, providing wood products. Farming and grazing. Commercial shellfish and fisheries. They're all important, and as to Jessica's point, I'm not quite sure how this committee really deals with, and maybe the short answer is you don't. What those uses are, for example, a farm that is kind of what we think of as a traditional farm 20 years from now, if it goes to all constructed greenhouses, is that a problem?
Burning diesel fuel would be that one's.
You know, if a forestry management plan changes from selective harvesting to clear cutting, is that a problem? No.
Fertilizer use. I mean, we've never evaluated, when we evaluated broad-term farm, we never evaluated. We never put restrictions on fertilizer use. Type,
But if you are conserving land forever, can you then clear cut it? Is that conservation?
Well, I mean, I'm also thinking about easements here, which allow for forestry. I mean, typically, standard conservation easement would require a forest management plan. But without calling out specific landowners, obviously everyone knows about a certain property that says, you know, this was certified by a professional forester. As
Sustainable for everything?
so there's a forest management plan done there, so I mean, it can look different. And I guess my point is does that then meet the criteria of the open space plan for watershed protection? Wildlife habitat, other recreational values. Where, you know, we get points for working lands. But it wouldn't necessarily get points for those other things if you were to move to that kind of extreme.
Right.
Forest management plan. So I don't know how I mean, those are things too that can't predict necessarily the use. Obviously, a lot of projects that come before you, like our projects, have very strict covenants and restrictions on them that say limits tree removal for us to very specific things. Human safety, trail clearing, that's about it, invasive species control. And other than that, we can remove trees. We can't necessarily, I mean, there are community forests that part of their existence is to provide firewood to the local community. I mean, technically, under our covenants and restrictions, we can't do that. So, I mean, I guess it's just a question of do you get into
Right,
what the management properties are?
right, exactly. I think that then, well, in your predicted future, use of the land as well, depending on what the restrictions are.
Well, I mean, a lot of the trouble starts when, someone purchases the land after. And like, oh, I'm gonna do this, like, nope, that's in the
So if it's in if it's in a conservation
conservation
easement,
easement, and it's not not the original landowner who understood the covenants and the restrictions, maybe, but when you're dealing with perpetuity, it's really hard to predict.
so I think the recommendation is to move that to the discussion section.
one thing we might wanna look at is what the working lands evaluation of the open space plan. Looked at,
Yeah.
it looked at current tree growth parcels, so.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with commercial. Activity, so, the owners have got this in tree growth and they intend to do that or whatever. So it's the working lands ranking map. In the open space plan, it's.
Yeah, it's, right.
Tree growth. Farmland, current use, undeveloped farmland, soils, Scarborough farmland inventory. The highest value was given to Scarborough's farmland inventory. And then the second highest for tree growth and farmland current use. And then they gave some points to undeveloped farmland soils. Which clearly is a little trickier from the standpoint of their reliance on the data. So. If we could conceivably give some points. Based on the open space plan, we would probably give points for farmland current use farmland, and current tree growth. The current properties that are in the tree growth ordinance. They probably deserve some funds for that. I don't know what to do about commercial logging. I don't have experience with it. We've never run into it. That's not to say we won't. We certainly could. I also don't know how to deal with questions like that Andrew just raised, like the potential changes in nature of farming over time. And as I said just a few minutes ago, we never considered, and probably should have, but I don't know how to do it. The use of pesticides, the use of fertilizers, and you know,
Is it only organic?
how much of that stuff
Give
is
points, is it only a sustainable forestry? There we give points.
the runoff
It
from
gets-
farms is huge, so. Yeah, so there's a lot of it, just.
I guess for me, because, so we make a recommendation about the funding itself, but we also can make recommendations as to. I keep calling it restrictions and that's the wrong word, but covenants, that, you know, if the town is providing funding for this conservation, we recommend that the council consider adding certain provisions about certain uses, and I think that's the role, not the points.
I will say the way it currently works is, when we are purchasing a property, if we're gonna own it. Basically, someone on the council, when they make the recommendation, says to the town manager, you will make sure that. The town interests are
Yes.
protected,
Yes.
and we have very elaborate. Covenant restriction
Yes.
document that we sign with the town, that gives the town authority wherever.
Yes.
Now, on a conservation easement, that's not true. It's really up to the restrictions put into the conservation, that our easements are fairly restrictive. So I think. The town will be fine with those, but there are potential easements.
Correct.
Again, that will allowing forestry and things, which is a standard practice. It's just a question of what terms you have in there in
Yes,
terms of.
terms, I've got it in the restrictions.
And, I'm not sure how the town has necessarily dealt with any of those. I don't think they've really, whether it's our easements or anyone else's easements, I don't think they really thought about what might be allowed or not allowed since over time.
So I think the other discussion point is easement terms or conservation easement terms.
But from the standpoint of coordinating with the open space plan. Working lands is really farms or tree growth. And if we want to coordinate with the plan, we would build in some points for farms and or tree growth.
And I think it makes sense to also include fishing access.
Yeah, I don't know, yeah.
I know it's not in the open space plan, but working waterfronts and accesses.
Do we pick up that stuff in the shoreline zone and in the adjacency to the marsh and that sort of stuff, or do
I
we?
think access is its own beast, right? It can be.
So we went
protected.
full circle just now, I think, didn't we?
No, we added, we kept and we added.
Well, we definitely have discussion about the use of the land, but question is, we give points for farms, community farms, maybe community farms is just a speculative thing, maybe we get rid of that. So do we give points for farming, fishery access?
Maybe you'd lump it into a broader category called agriculture.
Well, it sounds like
That's
it's
even smaller, it's more narrow.
tree growth, current use parcels, farmland, current use. And then. So the Scarborough farmland inventory is its own layer, is that
So according, yeah, they're assuming all these all these sub layers, data layers have their own data.
They're claiming there was a layer. They called
But
it,
that's existing, so what, I mean,
they call it a data layer.
that's existing farms, so,
Well, it said the darker areas represent combination of overlapping layers.
yeah, that's just multiple points. Yeah.
Just adding up more points, so there's
Yeah.
more than one thing there, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, more than one thing.
It's not a lot of points, I mean, we can even reduce the points.
Well, I was thinking it's a yes, no, if it meets any of the, if it's.
It's
incurring-
one scoring
it's
thing
one
if it
score
meets any of
these
those things.
criteria. So you don't get. I don't know if it was an additive, but
Right,
if you're in
any of these layers.
any of these layers, you
You
get,
get 20 points or something, 30 points.
yeah,
It's not gonna skew it. Yeah,
right.
it's okay with me. Doug, you think that's okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll keep it at 30 points,
I think giving some credit for is,
this is part of the open space plan. And what about WL3 fisheries access, and keep that, but reduce it to 20?
I thought the way she was explaining it was that if it falls into any of these three, your max amount overall would be 30.
But this plan didn't
That's
take
not-
fisheries into consideration.
Oh, shoot.
Because to me, like, if we had a piece of property that had parking and access to plant flats, I think that's valuable to the community.
I think it's part of our history, it's part of the culture, so I think it's an important piece.
Allow people walk out, strike bass fishing, whatever, I think there's value there.
But there's no layer, so I think that,
Well, we could put it in the access to, maybe it is an access to, or we just put it in access to.
it's in the access.
if it's,
Access to, up there, solar, marsh, or, yeah, saltwater marsh, or tidal flat, a river. We can put tidal plant flats in there.
yeah, I think while working waterfronts are a category of working lands, I think that
This is about access.
this is about access. So I move it to access, keeping working lands consistent with the definition in the open space plan and consolidating it into like one with it, then I'm fine with 30 points.
Is everybody okay with that? Being reasonable,
Yep.
all right,
I think it's all important to the community and we can't control the future.
okay, so let's go back now to,
So, I apologize. Are you adding another public access question to RC5?
no.
No,
Okay, so
I'm
RC5,
just gonna put mud flats and I'm gonna add mud flats to,
well,
It's a-
we've got an access question for saltwater marsh tidal river.
yeah, there's some mud flats.
I mean, we can increase the points. But, if you've got access to the saltwater marsh,
Yeah,
that's the mud flats, so
yeah,
I don't think it's necessary to.
well, you can have mud flats down in the marsh. And anyway, we have room for a couple of words.
If the mud flats are either on the tidal river or on the saltwater marsh.
Okay.
And we've got that question in there.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not trying to not give points to it, I mean,
No, we
I think
have,
it's valuable, but
we're
I think
just,
they're
we're
in
not
there,
gonna add, we're not gonna
Yes,
have
that's
another
what we're saying,
question
it's
for
already
working
in there.
lands.
yeah, in
so
the access.
this
Yeah.
is duplicative, so we're removing it here
Oh, okay,
Yes,
in the working lands,
yes.
in the working lands.
I would agree, I think the working lands should tie to the working lands in the open space.
Yes,
We get into other ones, it's merely it's a matter of discussion, what does it
Right.
mean? We've got commercial forestry down, whatever, that's a new deal. So it's a rare thing for us,
yes,
but farms and land that has been in farms and tree growth, those are something we're gonna run into all the time, so.
yes,
Having points for that, well, it's in there.
Okay,
yes,
good,
we're on the same page.
all right. We're needed agreement. All right, now we'll go to habitat. Parcel includes includes supportive, a supportive, maybe we need it, supportive habitat for significant species. So this talks about the land, the features of the land, doesn't, it's not saying that there are significant species there. This is about the quality of the land itself. And it says significant species, because we didn't want to be specific to any list, any endangered species, threatened species, somebody else's list, but we wanted to make it okay to bring up that argument that says we have a species that's important, according to this organization, it's a publicly documented blah, 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 and we want to be included there. Because some federalists don't really focus as much as on what's important, Scarborough and that sort of thing. Wanted it to be open, the language of that to be open for 50 points.
But let's take supportive out. Because we're getting into a whole issue of definitions. If we say supportive, what is supportive habitat? You know, what are the characteristics of that habitat that provide support? We're just talking about habitat for.
Right.
For
Supportive.
significant species. Right?
Well,
I agree with you. I think supportive just creates more opportunity for discussion. And habitat works.
well, to me, if we're talking about the spotted turtle. There has to be supportive habitat for that. There has to be a pond, or it has to be whatever the other species needs, that has to be it has to be present
Yeah,
on that parcel.
I guess so, as long as you don't want to have a complicated conversation about what is supportive. I mean, for a turtle, obviously it's water, you know, but I
Yeah,
mean, but obviously in other contexts. You know, for like a rabbit or something, you say this rabbit could do as well in another
Right.
habitat
But
as
you
this
say the northern white-tailed rabbit needs alder, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
That's what this
exactly.
is. That's what supportive means.
one.
So you actually want to get into in discussions, the nature of the habitat.
Yes, it's the quality of the habitat that we're talking about here, not
When we discussed this, what I thought we were doing was saying, somebody like Scott comes in and says, we have observed spotted turtles.
that is H2. It contains the significant
Ah.
species. We
So
spent a
more
lot of
like
time talking.
potential
The first
spots
is
for
this a
habitat.
good spot for a species? We think they're there, but we haven't really observed them there, and we hope they will get there or whatever. Versus, you know, if we've observed the species. Any
So,
thoughts, Andrew?
so in the industry term would be potential habitat.
that's-
Potential habitat, okay, thank you.
Because I know we've had applications where the bat has not been observed on site, but the habitat is consistent. For
Would be
the species.
conducive for
Yes,
bats.
yes.
to
Because,
live.
yes,
Right.
and those are two separate things, there's the potential and then there's the observed, because it's really hard to get the observed. You have to you get a wildlife biologist and,
Well,
Or take pictures like we.
the ultimate purpose of this document, being a newbie on this committee, it seems to me the ultimate purpose of this document is to assist a broader thinking process.
Sure, yeah.
And
yes,
to the extent that these questions are conducive to that, it's positive.
yes.
If you were gonna have somebody sit down and litigate this document, you
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
would not want to have, you would wanna have different, you'd wanna be
Yes.
using different
And let
linguistic
potentially
language terms.
is there a term that's used just like the word term expert.
To what extent does this document get made public, or is this just something for the committee to use as a guide to a thinking process?
Whoa,
Would you
so
attach this to a board package and say this is how we scored a specific project?
they usually get all of the materials, but
They also get this as well.
yeah, so they get the application materials, they get this, but they also get what I'm gonna call a cover letter. And that has the point total in context of other previous properties. And then I present it. And I'm gonna let you decide how much people read. Like, I don't know that some counselors even read the letter.
Well, if you're gonna take a lazy person's approach to this, the easiest thing to do is just look at the points.
That's what we're trying to avoid, that's.
Exactly.
Other
So when
discussion
you
about making
highlight,
sure.
when you highlight points, it just makes it that much easier for somebody to do that.
Right, and that's why we're talking
I
about,
know it's
Putting the all
important to you
four
to
steps.
demonstrate consistency and then logic and all of those good things, but
Well,
you know, it's a double-edged sword.
it's a double-edged sword, so we know we don't wanna do a checklist because there's not enough nuance. And therefore, we have to do a point system, but it's a discussion, it's a guide. And it helped, there is some,
To what questions, to what extent is your judgment on these issues questioned?
it's usually at a much higher level. Why this price? What's, what about this, they're not getting into.
They're not getting into questions of value or in value in the sense of its value as a conservation project.
Well, there's two things, there's the council's questions.
Yeah.
And then there's the public's, because this is the public's money. And so there are very different levels of consideration in with those groups. And I think it's important for us to be publicly transparent, that we had a thorough evaluation process, and that our evaluation is underpinned by science and ecology and the open space plan and public opinion. And so,
And a certain amount of logic.
and a certain amount of logic. And so that's all publicly available. And I will say, people do listen, they either come to the meetings or they listen to the meetings, they request the documents, they look at them, they provide public comment. So I think it's still, while there might not be an extended conversation at council level, even by the town council members themselves, there is extended consideration by members of the public, rightly so. Again, this is public money that we're making recommendations on. So I think that I would not want to change our process, because I believe in our process. I think it's the right approach. And while we're updating it from 20 years ago to reflect
We're updating 1/12 of the process.
yes, that's what I was gonna say.
I mean,
That's
12 points.
Yes.
Okay, this is the reason it works.
Yes.
The reason it works is that this is a very small part of it. That's why it irritates the heck out of me to spend so much time on this quantitative stuff. But I understand with the open space plan coming up, members of the council have become very focused on this form. And our job is to update that, make sure it's consistent with the open space plan.
Yes.
But it's part of a 12-point evaluation process. And that is the most important thing, is that there is a process. If we want to redo that, that's fine. And then we would have to propose to the council that the evaluation process be changed. This is only 1/12 of it, there's 12 points, okay? And they're all I don't know about relative weights of all 12.
Right.
But there's 12 things that happen. And of course, a lot of them get combined, so we're talking about these things, everything else. But it's worked very well simply because this evaluation process is a process as opposed to a form. And
I'm not in the discussion there, because we can go on forever. In the interest of time, I think we're all in agreement that this is part of the process. And it's not, a certain level score passes or fails.
Right.
Okay, so we're gonna move ahead on that. So H2, significant, the parcel contains significant species. So that gives you get 20 points if it's yes or no, it can be documented. Pictures, whatever. Give you 20 points for that. Any species, and broadly defined significant species. Parcel includes wetlands. This is from the open space 25 plan. And we give 50 points for that. Parcel includes habitat features or designation, including
And then we listed a bunch of things here, and we give it 10 points, or we give vernal pools 20, because we think it's more important than some of the other things. And then you can also add some other feature for 10 points. Okay, so a lot of these are from the open space plan.
I like the addition of the other. That's nice.
Yeah.
It's the opportunity if there's something special.
All right, any questions, thoughts on that? Okay, recreation and connectivity, big points here. Okay. Parcel creates a link between public or protected parcels. A lot of these are the same as we used to have. The 50 points, yes or no. Parcel creates a link between trails, 50 points. Parcel of lots of public or protected lands. Again, 50 points, again, trying to create that. Cumulative of larger parcels of protected land. Parcels near protected lands. We gave that 25 points. You want to say why, Doug?
We've observed over the last, 10, 15 years that the land trust has been particularly successful at creating larger pieces. Once pieces that are separate in an area are owned. And I guess it's logical, right? That once some pieces are protected, some landowners might be more open to the idea or become aware of the idea or whatever, but it certainly seems to have been, the trust has been successful, I think, in doing that, and this just gives points for that. Going forward.
Good. And then we get to the question of parcel provides access to beaches, marshes, and tidal rivers, upland rivers.
Add those mud flats, put them in there,
Freshwater marsh, other areas.
So when it was part of working lands, it was 30 points. Do we want to add, because these are all 10? Do we want to up that to 30 or are we comfortable with 10?
No, I think I think it's fine, keeping that there. Oh, you mean for the marsh, tidal rivers, mud flats for fisheries?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that 20 of them. I'm okay with 20 for that one. Doug? Anybody else?
whatever people think.
I think that is kind of important. All right, we're gonna have that for 20. And then parcel option, passive recreation. Picnicking, hiking, swimming, birding, horseback riding. If it's existing, we give it 20 and potentially to be added or expanded, another.
Where does hunting and fishing fall?
That would be passive, I guess. Yeah, I'll add that, thank you. No, 10 points.
So we stayed away. When we did this originally, and certainly can change now. But. We stayed away from wildlife harvesting. Giving points for wildlife harvesting, not because it was a bad thing. But because there are different views, particularly hunting. So. Does town money want to be used to promote hunting or to not promote hunting, or there's an interpretation. When you start getting points for that, if people do want to look at the detail. So I'm just raising that issue.
Just through background.
Nothing that we've done in the past has said that we are promoting or not promoting hunting person. And I think it's a good idea for us to stay out of that, but how lands are used, certainly, is important, and it should be part of the discussion. But why we give points for hunting, I'm not sure.
So the US Fish and Wildlife Service's survey is always hunting, fishing and wildlife related recreation. We just changed it to wildlife related recreation.
Well, that'd be birding and that sort of thing, right? But we don't have that in there yet. What do they call
Wildlife related.
it? Wildlife related.
which would include hunting and fishing and trapping. I will say that hunting and fishing are culturally important in Maine. And that by legislation, any use of LMF funds have to allow for hunting, fishing and trapping. And so the state has recognized it as important in terms of any land acquisition that is done. So yes, in that sense, I can see where town could put importance on it.
Yeah, and I think. To send the message to citizens that we're not trying to do away with that kind of cultural history, heritage, the fact that just because you conserve land doesn't mean you can't fish on it. And so I think it should be added, hunting, fishing and trapping. As 10 points.
So it's getting. Oh, okay, yeah.
Added it. Is that all right, folks?
So under RC5.
Yes. Anybody else? Objections to that?
Yeah, I do object to it, but I just don't think it's appropriate to bring it up. I don't disagree with anything Andrew's saying, I don't see why hunting, fishing and trapping needs to be mentioned in this evaluation form at all. You can discuss that kind of stuff as part of the process.
Yeah.
Andrew's absolutely right that it may be involved in LMF requirements, et cetera, et cetera. But we have properties where there's no hunting.
Right, I'm not sure.
It's properties where there's no trapping. I think you open up a can of worms if we seem to be promoting
Trapping,
hunting and trapping. There's a big difference between hunting and birding, hunting and picnicking. If we're going to put examples of these things, if you want to do it, the best thing to do would be parcel offers opportunity for passive recreation. Don't even put it in any examples.
Well, that's what I thought we
Furthermore,
were talking about, that's why.
furthermore, hunting isn't passive recreation either. So
So.
it's
So-
pretty active. Going out and
It's pretty
killing,
aggressive.
going out and killing stuff is pretty aggressive, yes.
So,
It may be culturally important, but that's beside.
so 5 is related to land cover types. And
Yes.
6 is related
Yes.
to access.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. I'm sorry, you're right. Thank you, Jessica.
so
The
that's
reason
why I don't think it's
Yeah.
appropriate.
It's not in 5.
So it's not in 5 because it's not a land cover type, and it is included but not called out specifically in 6 because it is a type of recreation. Passive recreation in that, I guess I think of active recreation as often, motorized vehicle.
Yeah. We need an ETC, make sure that it's, yes, you're right. Thank you for reminding us with the questions, Jessica. Yeah, so then the 5 is the characteristic of the land itself,
Right,
whereas recreation is 20 points for any kind of recreation.
right.
We'll just leave it at that, unless we want to add in wildlife related. We don't want to even say that.
That's fine. We can leave it at, I think.
All right, thank you. Good. 7, parcel will provide access to passive recreation to residents that you don't currently have such within 1/2 mile. That is part of the Scarborough comprehensive plan goal. Scott brought this up. That was really necessary. It's really great to give points for that because that's part of the plan. So basically, anybody could walk to the conservation area as public access.
I think it's
So we
great. It's
added that
underserved
question.
areas.
I didn't even realize Listen there.
Something Scarborough Land Trust suggested in the comprehensive planning process. Because we think it is important, you know, you're absolutely right, we have focused a lot on increasing the size of conserved areas, whether they're ours or someone else's, because those larger areas do provide a lot of benefit. But we also have to give a little bit of nod of how do we start places that don't have anything else around them that are more available than walking distance to communities that don't have to get in their car and drive to Forward Farm or places like that.
Seems like if it's in our comprehensive plan as a town, it ought to be in our.
Yeah.
No, I think it's great.
RCA. Parcel office seeing views of lots of different things or adding. One thing. When I looked at this total of 345 points for recreation activity, I thought. Actually, maybe to make it simpler, we could just, instead of saying in question 5, provides access to, we could say, or. Scenic view of, just combine those,
I think those are so different.
so different.
Access and being in something you can only see, totally different.
Is it important that we provide views, that we support or give points for views?
No, I think it's much more important that we look at apartments. That's pretty much where we're going. And I really like apartment buildings.
Yeah,
I think
because people need housing.
They're extremely attractive.
So you would like to just leave this question, is that what you're saying? All right,
You know, we've never had a lot of discussion about it because it doesn't usually come up, you know. But occasionally, there's a piece of property, I think we had one on Beach Ridge. Trust brought us recently, where this property allowed views from Beach Ridge as you were driving, you know, and I can't give a lot of points for that kind of thing, it's very subjective. But gosh, you know, that's a rural character, and I know we're not a rural town, never going to be, you know. But as you drive down Broad Turn in a line of 20 cars, it'd be nice to see trees to the side. I don't mean to be sarcastic, but that's pretty much where we are, right? Traffic. So scenic views have some value to me.
but this is not scenic views from a road, this is the parcel provides, so standing on the parcel, you can see.
I think it can
Marsh,
be both.
or you can see,
I think that's valuable. If it
Yeah.
exists. But
this is a lot of points, do we maximize the points at 30? I mean, it's the same, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 70 points, if you can give all those things, potentially impossible, but.
how about, did you just say earlier, a certain number of points, if any?
Yeah.
Was that something you threw out? Because instead
I
of,
would just say,
instead of all those separate, just say, I think you said this, right? If there's a view of any of these things, then you get
10 points.
10 points or whatever.
okay. Sounds good. I like that,
Because I believe
and
town hall gets a lot of calls when trees suddenly go missing, right? They're like, what just happened? Because it is something that people care about. And
should we do it 20 points, 10 on that? I mean, if you have 2 or 3 things.
Well, I can tell you they're disappearing, those scenic views. So
Okay,
I
I'm gonna
I
give
don't
it
know
'cause I'm-
whether we can have anything to do with that or not, but they're disappearing.
I know it's jarring.
All right, we're gonna go to 20 here.
So 20.
20. All right, good. We're
Oh my
almost there,
Goodness.
so
Proud of us.
the last question on leverage. I think this requires some discussion. The old question, I was confused by the old question. It said. Public investment, I just called it, we call it leverage. Fee interest purchase is possible, used to give that points. Easement is possible, we gave that points. But to me, if we don't have either a purchase or an easement, we wouldn't be going through this process, so I was confused by that. Historic question.
Was
Do you
it-
remember
was it
what that
different?
is? Yeah,
Did you get more points for purchase than you did easement?
no, but
No?
Do you remember what that was, Doug? Why we had those questions?
No, no, I don't recall that there was there were very specific reasons why we were giving points for the ability to actually buy the property or to purchase an easement. And I don't remember
Yeah,
why.
We've certainly not had any other
but you would, if we weren't,
mechanisms.
if that wasn't the case, we wouldn't be involved in this
No,
process.
I don't disagree.
Okay, that's all right, so let's take, we're gonna keep those, remove those questions, I'm gonna say. Is private funding paying a significant portion of the purchase price? If we left that as an adjective, qualify significant, we don't put a number on that, but maybe we should. 20 points, the state of Maine funding paying significant portion, 20, federal funding, 20. And then we took we added negative 20 points because the purchase price is 10% more than the appraised value.
The only thing I'd say, and I did have this objection to this when we were putting it together. After you threw this out, I agree with the concept. The first three could be lumped into is a private or public funding available for this property and give points for that. I would say that it has to be available as opposed to they are paying. The reason is we often are asked to evaluate using town funds because getting grants from other places is almost incumbent upon having that commitment.
I think
We've had a number of properties like
match funding in hand points.
that. Okay,
Which would include private, state, or federal, right? Like if a grant, and then there's the kind of the bridge loan, which is match funding potential.
right.
And then I would also say that a landowner donation should also get points because that, a bargain sale is also a benefit in terms of leverage.
Okay.
I definitely agree with the landowner part. I'm a little concerned about the match in hand.
I was
Because
thinking
we
of-
often can use, if we can get the town money first, that's a stronger case
Yes.
to get the match. Because a lot of funders like to be the final piece. They like to say, okay, we're finishing this project. You already have this amount of money. And it just makes a stronger case for us to go to them saying,
And that's by far what most of the ones. So
I was only trying
funding in
to
hand is very, very rare.
differentiating between the potential for bridge loan, because I think there should be points for that. So for example, NACA is a multi-year cycle. The town might be completely reimbursed or a portion or not at all. But I still think you should get, that doesn't. So if the town is paying the full purchase price upfront, but is fully reimbursed, that should still count as potential for match, but it's potential versus.
So should we give 10 points for potential match? Potential.
Versus we have an LMF grant for half. I don't see those as equal. Because we have an LMF grant in half, for half in hand. Or we have the potential for the federal government to fully reimburse the town at some point in the future. Those are not one-to-one to me.
Right, so,
I don't know how to word that.
yeah,
I know the council cares about that.
right, so I think one is, it's in hand, or it's, at least it's promised or in process. And then there's one for potential. And I would say you get 20 points for the one that's in hand documented. And 10 points for potential, like the one we did on the grant fund, right? There's potential for reimbursement time. It may not go through, so that would be 10 points versus.
Because I know
20.
council has asked me about the likelihood of federal funding giving the current administration, like, well.
Yeah, but
We don't
in
know.
that case, if you've been granted the money, you have to give it full points. We can't.
Yes,
speculate that the
Exactly.
current administration is gonna pull that.
But if there's one that
It's
is
pending,
pending,
it's pending.
yes, but, and then landowner donation, I think should get more points.
So
Or
If it
maybe-
was a donation, total donation, we wouldn't be going through this
No,
process.
they usually do a bargain sale, that's what I mean by landowner
Okay,
donation.
it's some portion of the appraised value.
Yeah.
So
And how many points for
property
that?
could get points for both. If we have funding in hand, bargain sale, potential funding, you could get points for two of those, which is appropriate.
No, I think so. My personal thing is, I think we should get points for every one of these things. Because it's each purchase is different,
Additive.
right? It could be just a town sale purchase, no private funding, no Scarborough Land Trust, no any other private funding. It could be Scarborough Land Trust town, and then maybe linking federal and state together makes sense, just for specific purposes. And then it could be bargain sale.
Another way to look. And, I think there should be a separate landowner donation component for certain points. But I guess another way to look at the other type of funding is. This wouldn't necessarily handle NACA, that bridge loan component, we have to figure out that piece, but. You could. Give points based upon the percent of the project the town is paying compared to other funding sources.
That's true, that would capture it, I think.
So, if it's. The town is paying 50% or less, X points, the town is paying 75% or less, X points. 50 to 75%, if we're paying. Then, over 75%, maybe. There's no points. Awarded or something like that, and I think it should be more than. That's pretty significant.
That's a lot
I
of
think there
work.
should be a lot of points.
Really low, yeah.
Given if the town is only paying 50% or less of the project.
Should be up there in the 50 point. One's probably.
Because that's really leveraging the land.
Oh,
bond.
sure.
It's-
Yeah, so is there value in, so I think, I like the idea of more points for less cost to the town. But is there significant, value in calling out state funding, private funding, private donations, or just leave it as,
I don't think it really.
Other
matters.
sources.
The town standpoint where it comes from.
yeah,
I mean, it could be,
right.
donations from private, it could
It's
be
obviously in the argument, in the
other sources.
presentation, but it doesn't matter from the town perspective, otherwise.
So for me, I do present when it's land for Maine's future because it's prestigious for us to receive.
Yeah,
There are
but you can
certain,
put that in the narrative.
yes,
doesn't have-
exactly, it does not in the point system, but I think it's important to highlight where Scarborough, this conservation is nationally significant or, statewide significance. I think that's important that we know that, that these lands are really important to us as a community and,
Yeah. So what if we do this? We do points, 50 points for over 50%, maybe 50 or above. Lots,
at least 50.
that's what I'm saying.
50%,
Match.
you mean,
So if
you mean the
if
amount
the town
requested?
is paying less than 50%
we
of
don't,
the purchase price, you give it 50 points.
the
The
amount
amount that
requested
be higher,
equal to.
should be 60%.
I think
50 seems
50.
right.
We've kind of used 50 as a benchmark in the evaluation that was being done last fall. For the land bond voting, but there's nothing magical about that.
Yeah.
But.
Is that too high? It's
Well,
because most of it's low,
seems-
somewhere between 40 and
If
50.
you go 50, if you go less
Purchase
than
price.
50,
We've been.
that deserves the most points.
Yes.
That's a total cost.
Total cost, but
I
you have to realize that these projects have to be. have to look at them at all the costs. that
I
are-
think total cost is appropriate.
Well, that's what we've been looking at, so we should keep that.
Including the stewardship for the first year. It's not a big, so it's, that's.
I guess up to the committee, but definitely for all the other costs.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to.
Oh, yeah, I'm just talking about, the only thing I was thinking of is the stewardship part.
And, you know, the reality is there, the stewardship piece is not, our numbers are not meant to fund stewardship forever.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
the
they're
first
just,
year.
they're not big enough. They're to give us a start on stewardship. And the reality is there is no funding mechanism in the town to take care of its long-term costs of property.
I agree. All right, this is all total cost.
Total cost,
Total cost.
And it's
so less than,
50%.
less than or equal to 50% would be the highest points.
Is 50 the right number?
And then 75 to 50, I don't know what the right number is, but that's a nice round number.
Yeah.
And then 75 to 50,
So,
get some points.
I think 25 is a good threshold just because there's a lot of federal grants that
So,
will only cover
minimum.
25%. So I think 25 is.
so how about we just do two? Is at least 50 or over, is 50% and 25.
Yeah,
25 and 50
You
is
get
30 points.
precise with this, we're just trying to give some points for the
Okay.
fact that there's external funding available.
Does that seem reasonable?
And then
Yeah.
I strongly think we should have a bargain sale as a separate category because we want to encourage landowners.
You know, I am in definitely do whatever you think is best here, but I guess if you're looking at the total project cost,
Because the total project cost would take out the landowner dimension.
well, you could have it where the total project cost. We tend to set our budgets up so that total project cost includes the landowner donation,
Okay.
but so. You know, if the total cost of the project is $1 million. And they're giving 200,000, we'll show that as a $200,000 donation.
Right.
So that would lower the percent the town is giving, so. You know, it's if you include it that way, it is incorporated into that first thing they're doing with 50 points below. 50%.
Because it is private, it's a private store. It's not the town.
So,
It should be included. Yeah.
That's shown as,
It's not that town.
if that's shown as donation, then it's fun, then it would be funding in hand.
Yeah.
So it would be affected, it would be picked up in the funding in hand question, which I think is worth points, this funding in hand.
Yeah.
Whether it's landowner donation or whatever, and then the land bond is paying 50%, 75.
Well, it's definitely
Keep it
part of the
simple.
discussion, because I know that the council is very appreciative of landowners who make a donation.
and it's significant, I mean, you get $200,000 off the purchase price. That goes a long way, because properties are expensive. Market price here in Scarborough is huge.
So let me clarify, we're gonna give points for percentage of the cost going to the town. We're also gonna give points for bargain sale, landowner property sale, bargain sale, as an
Well,
actual bonus.
My point was, I think funding in hand picks that up.
We're not doing funding,
Oh, we're not gonna do that?
no, we're
It'd be
simplifying.
match, we were gonna simplify it to match amount.
Oh, to the match amount, I see.
Well, do we wanna give 20 points for any?
See, funding in hand and the potential match amount, I mean. The land trust might ask us for 50% of the total because they're fairly certain of getting the funding in the other end. But they won't have it in hand. And
Right, I mean, in hand is not the right word to use. Because a lot of this stuff, it's not in hand, because the land trust has to raise the last 200 grand or whatever.
I'm just saying, I like what Jess said early on with that, is that
Is
if by
funding is,
chance.
private
if by
funding is
chance the
paying,
funding is in
I
hand-
say, I use the word paying is just this. That's what they're doing, whether it's in hand or not in hand.
Non-town funding committed, can we say that? And then that would include landowner
We can
donations,
say
that would.
covering sanitary purchase price for the total purchase price. And just not make it in hand or out of hand, it's just,
Let's just go to the center purchase price,
Yeah.
purchase
Yeah.
of total cost. Total
I would
cost.
always mention
Just
it.
go to percentage
Yeah.
of cost and mention it. and-
okay, I would suggest we do covering or paying, I'll send it to you, my wording. And have a little checkbox, is there private funding? Yes, is there bargain sale? Yes, is there federal, is there state?
Yeah.
Just so we have no, so
Yeah.
we have the, just to,
But don't put in.
there's not gonna be separate points for it.
Don't put into this form that is private funding paying a significant portion, because we don't know on those properties.
It'll just be the match amount and then.
What do you, I don't understand your question.
Well, we know what's being requested. We know that the request.
Well, if
50% of
the land
total.
trust comes in and says, I'm gonna buy a property for $100, and we're paying 50. That is paying, you know, our plan is to take $50 of our money and
Right.
$50 your money, that's paying the given portion.
Okay, so
Right.
I'm just personally a little more comfortable saying the land bond is, the town's being asked to pay 50% of the cost. As opposed to saying other sources are paying 50%.
Okay,
Because
that's
in
fine,
a lot of
it's the
cases,
same,
a lot of cases,
we're
we're not-
just arguing about.
we don't have it yet.
Some units.
Right, it's
Okay.
simplifying.
I'm gonna write it up, send it to.
Yeah, simplifying it to the land bond.
The request
The
is
request,
for 50% or less of the total cost.
Yep.
Right.
Keep it simple. But let's keep the points for purchase price is 10% more or more over appraised value.
Do we wanna, thank you for bringing that up, do we wanna keep that in, or do we wanna bring that to discussion point? According to Scott and the Land Trust, 10% is the number that. For federal tax purposes, if the land trust, give me if I'm wrong, the land trust pays more than 10% of the appraisal, they have to make an argument and go through hoops, is that right?
Well, there's no hard and fast, some states have hard and fast laws that say how much organizations can pay above appraised value. As far as I understand, this really is part of our national standards and practices that we follow. So as part of that national standards and practices, we have a policy for the land trust that says we won't pay more than 10% above appraised value. This way, it's an ethical question, right? So that you're not paying just whatever someone asks for a property. There are entities that aren't necessarily restricted to that, and yet I don't want to pick on anyone, but the town could theoretically pay 200% of appraised value if they wanted. Voters might freak out, but there's nothing that restricts them from doing that. I think the idea here is if PCLB is looking at the purchase of property, should that be penalized for spending over appraised value on a parcel or not?
That's why we had it in originally. We don't have to keep it, but that's why we had it. So, and it's more of an issue of other entities bringing us properties. The land trust per se.
Just do what they do in the banking universe and go and get another appraisal.
That's true. I mean,
Get the appraisal that makes you happy.
Yeah, as long as they're both approved, right? Yeah, okay, so we're gonna leave that in. Negative 20 points.
Can I make Vicky a comment of the day?
Yes.
Under assumption number 3 in the front,
Yes,
might check the spelling of council.
council, yes, thank you.
That's what people always do to me.
Yes, thank you. No, I appreciate that. I'll put an I in there and a C, right? Okay,
And the last one's just about the open space, right, plan? OC.
oh, yes, I'm sorry. The last question, we thought it was important, given that the town did identify
certain areas of town we wanna focus on. We didn't wanna exclude any properties that weren't in that area, but we wanted to give a nod to the plan and give it 50 points. I thought it was a little high, 50 points. But that's what we decided on. So if it's in the, either the focus area or the, what's it called?
There's high value. and
High value,
contiguous.
yes.
So the dark blue or
The dark blue or the light blue, doesn't matter, not distinguishing between the two colors. We give it 50 points to this
Yeah,
version.
yeah, and I don't know why 50 points either. I didn't think we wanted 50.
Well,
Just
I
said-
think it's a little high, so
Yeah.
I would make it 20 maybe.
Yeah, I would say, I would agree.
Right.
We had a long discussion about.
We didn't
this,
wanna make it
And we didn't want
too
to,
much focus on.
right. I mean, I know I was guilty of saying, you know, if we're gonna do the open space plan and any part of the piece touches this stuff, probably ought to give it some points. Ultimately, the folks agreed. But we don't want to overdo that because it's just a small piece. I mean, but it's, once again, it's tying what we're doing to the open space plan. And this is the thing that summarizes all the various maps in one place. So you ought to get some points.
Yeah. And I'm gonna add,
So-
is it included in or adjacent to the open space value? Cause it's touching, it's close enough, I did. All right,
Especially if we're trying to do networks.
right. Any other thoughts? We were right on time pretty much. Okay, so I will revise this, send it to the council. I'll include Scott. And then we hopefully can get some feedback from Noah and Sue. Could you facilitate that, Jessica? I've never talked to you once. Just have a conversation or something. They have valuable insight.
I'll text them
We
back.
have never heard this issue.
So I will-
Well, end of day, we should have the meeting too, so we can
Yes, I was
send
gonna
that.
say, our next meeting is on the 28th. We do have an application for review that date. My proposal is that we review the application and then vote on this. How do you feel? Because I anticipate, we also have another application, it's not complete, but in the queue for our September meeting, so I'm concerned that if we postpone applications, we're in. And I've just been told there's another one.
If we just meet, you know, every day for the next 2 months, we'll be golden.
Yes.
We need people to look at this and pay attention to it on this committee. I could appreciate that people are busy, there's nothing we can do about that. But, you know, this is pretty critical stuff. And particularly in terms of the council's view of what we're doing and the recommendations of the open space plan. So a lot of work has been put in, and I'm not saying that because of the time Sam and I and Scott put into it. I'm saying it because the time has been put in, we've got a document, we've got something that this workshop has spent a lot of time on. We need our committee to do and approve it or tell us there's something's wrong. So, you know, and if we have to, we can pass it with a just bare floor. We have to, but I hate to do that.
I think that's right. We need to find.
We got to pass it.
We need to vote.
There's a whole bunch of work that has to take place once this is
Once
approved,
it's-
right?
yeah.
I mean, what does that mean in terms of the open space plan? What are the GIS, you know, what do we have? What's Micah doing? What, you know, who's doing what? You know, there's a lot of
Right,
stuff.
and we have to do that ahead of time too, so.
So I need the revised,
Yeah.
for the 21st, because it has to go. Because it's a town meeting, all materials must be published 1 week in advance of the meeting for us to be able to vote on it, so I need it by the 21st at the latest. I try to do it on Wednesdays because they don't work Fridays.
Oh, I'm sorry, on the 28th, there's a town council meeting?
No, there's a PCLB meeting.
Yeah.
Our next PCLB meeting is on the 28th,
The
so all materials are needed for
Oh,
that meeting,
public. Okay.
because
All
they're,
right.
for us to vote on it, we have
Yes.
to have the
Yeah.
meetings public by the 21st. I like to do it
Okay.
on the 20th.
Well, I'll put it out next day or two.
Okay.
For comment, only give a couple of days.
Do you have an updated version of this, Paul? Do you update it as when?
I did, but I would
Yeah,
defer to
I
his.
haven't changed. And I'm gonna put it to you and, I'm gonna send it to you and Scott. For final look and then,
Well, Sent it just the same time, just to save time, because, you know, anything we
yeah,
came up with is gonna be minor at this point.
Alright,
So, and that'll save. time.
okay, sounds good.
Because again, I'll reiterate, I'm very nervous about the expertise and knowledge that we're losing at the end of this calendar year, so we really have to get it moving, or we have to depend on people's good graces to beginning of the year to explain things to us. So I think we're losing you and we're losing Sue, I think.
Yeah, well,
Lots of work.
the good news is that with the open space plan, tying this to the open space plan, we're starting, it's a new place from the standpoint of the origination of the form, okay, so it's no longer, you know, what were you guys thinking in 2001, which is good, which is critical. I'm more worried about the basis for this thing, which is the GIS.
And I'm gonna,
Yes.
I'm gonna put layers with Jamie and like,
When are we gonna have that?
add
Is
it
that meeting?
next.
Yes.
Says Mike have been trained.
At least have a phone conversation.
I'll reach out to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly simple question, is what data did the consultants use, is it all public to get access to it? And if not, how do we get access to it?
Well,
And if you don't have access to it, we'll have to just change,
they were supposed to make a version that was
Yeah.
useful for us.
yeah,
Us meaning the town committees to. So that, and move that to us, and they were being paid to do that, so it's some deliverable.
all right, team.
So, but that would have to be, anyway, 20th, if we're gonna vote, it needs to be to everybody by the 21st.
Yeah, that's. No problem.
But Mike is using the existing one for this process, so.
For the application that's received. But if we can get it to him, I mean, a good test run could be the application in front of us, he runs it both ways.
Well, you're assuming he has the stuff.
Yes, assuming he has it done, and that's a whole nother ball.
Well, that's my point.
Yes,
You can't do anything if he doesn't have a GIS license from now
right.
in the format. that's usable.
So yeah, it's a little wild because we're trying to do a lot. And we have a lot of applications coming in, so
It's awesome.
good problems to have.
Oh, we have a good process in place, you know, I like the updated version of this evaluation better, personally. I think it's a big improvement. And we're using the open space plan, but if we don't have the data from the open space plan to use yet,
Yeah,
then we use our existing process.
it's true.
And if anybody has the original files for the process, I can't imagine anyone does after 20 years, otherwise we're gonna have to rewrite it.
Oh, yeah.
Let me look, because I'm,
The only original that we have appears to be a scan.
Yes.
oh. Okay,
So-
let me look, because either Sue or I must have a copy of
Sue
that
makes it sound like she might have.
online, but let me look at what I have, that she's in my head, and just see if I can find. There were several different things, you know, there
It
was.
looks like it's pieces that
Yeah.
kind of just got put.
Okay,
So
yeah,
if we can find the original pieces.
Yes.
Then we can put it
Let me
back
see what I-
together.
let's see what I've got.
All right, I'm gonna stop recording.
Maybe I've got it, it's,
All right.
it's.